So, hello and welcome along to another edition of Isolation Interviews for Hospital Radio Reading and for my YouTube channel. And I am super excited to be joined by a talented broadcaster in the form of Nihal, and I do apologise if I get this wrong, but Arthanayake, have I got that right?
Yeah, it's Nihal Arthanayake, yeah.
Arthanayake, perfect. But no, I say thank you for joining me. How are you? How have things been with you?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question. They are like everybody's life. There are moments of joy and there are moments of pain and there are moments of happiness. There are moments of sadness, moments you jump around dancing for joy. Other moments you lie on the couch and fall asleep at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Not obviously while I'm on air, but yeah, so there's lots going on, Matthew.
I mean, of course, the last couple of years in particular has been challenging, tricky. How have you kind of coped with the ever-changing world we find ourselves in and kind of getting to grips with everything?
I am supremely conscious that I have been in relative privilege. I've managed to work throughout it. I have managed to go into work, so I haven't felt isolated in that respect. But also, Matthew, I think we're too soon, I would say after it, but we're not after it. You know, it hasn't gone away. So, and then we're into Ukraine and Russia. So, and then the cost of living crisis. So I don't know if I'll know exactly what happened for another year or two, if I'm honest. You know, because it feels weird to say, God, that was a weird pandemic, because there's still people wearing masks and there's still people needing to get vaccinated and there's still people who are getting really sick. So yeah, I don't really know is the long way of answering that question.
I mean, it is a strange time to be alive in, I suppose you could say. I mean, No one's really ever known anything like this in the past. I mean, we're kind of living history, really.
Yes, yeah. But I mean, everybody is every day, but you're right. I mean, since the end of 2019 into 2020, throughout 2021, and now we're not that far away from halfway through 2022. And it's just been a colossal pile of manure, really. I mean, that's with moments of joy and happiness and togetherness and community that makes you feel great, you know? And then there's this kind of, and we haven't even seen the beginning of it. I mean, the cost of living crisis, what that's going to do potentially to the fabric of our society, difficult to know, but we know what happened after the 2007, 2008 financial crash in terms of, poverty numbers and various other indicators that we're all heading in the wrong way. So, yeah, I don't know.
I mean, for you, it must have been quite nice to know that you were able to still obviously do your radio show and be able to connect with listeners all around the world. So to be able to continue that, although people were going through their own personal struggles, you could kind of be there to give them that kind of relief or escapism for a couple of hours a day. Must have been great.
Yeah, it was actually, because we made the decision that largely through the pandemic, not with Ukraine for obvious reasons, but with the pandemic, we wanted to provide distraction. So we didn't want every show to be talking about coronavirus and COVID-19. Those 3 hours we kind of saw as an oasis to kind of come to and just forget about it. And also to celebrate community, celebrate the things that people were doing to help each other. That's what we tried to do throughout that period, really. And it was great. It was great in the sense that it wasn't great for the country, but it was great that we could provide that. And I think people really appreciated the fact that we were doing that, Matthew.
And it must also be great to be able to connect with people all over the world, not just, sort of celebrities, but kind of all sorts of people from all walks of life. Must be great to be able to include all that.
Yes. Look, you're on the BBC, which is one of the most recognized media brands in the world. You can pretty much go anywhere and say, who do you work for? And you say, oh, the BBC. And they go, oh, BBC. Now, they may loathe the BBC or they may love the BBC, but they know about the BBC. And trust me, I've been to all different parts of the world, across Africa and South America and China and India, and everyone knows, you know, and it's nice. It's really nice, man, to get just a direct message on Instagram or a tweet from someone who just says that meant something, that made me think about the world in a different way. Or I sat outside late for a meeting in my car because I couldn't get away from that interview you were doing with someone. That's, I mean, such a, can't tell you what an amazing feeling that is. You know, I feel truly blessed to have that in my life.
And I mean, having spoken to so many amazing people, I suppose it's hard to pick, but is there a kind of a favorite or a person that you've spoken to that you've thought, wow, this is kind of just completely either shocked you or amazed you at kind of how nice they were or how great they were, you know, talking to?
I think that my first interview with Sir Billy Connolly, who's one of the most famous comedians and actors in the history of comedy, right? Like he's your favorite comedian's favorite comedian, right? And when I interviewed him, Joe Lycett, Ramesh Ranganathan, they all gave messages. I think Eddie Izzard did as well. We got messages from all these people who wanted to ask the Big Yen, as he's called, a question. And that interview in a hotel suite in Glasgow was just superb. You know, that and Liam Gallagher, weirdly, they're the two where I've just kind of gone, wow. But there's so many wow moments. First interview I did with John Bon Jovi, I'd been doing that job like a month or something. And there we are in a hotel suite in one of the most expensive hotels in London. Cameras, lights. I mean, John Bon Jovi. Like, it's quite surreal. It's quite weird, you know, because they're so famous. You sometimes forget. But then equally, interviewing Sam Fender before he signed a record deal is, again, a completely special moment for me. And an extraordinary one. The Oscar-winning actor Sally Field was superb, just brilliant. There's just so many. You know, the Headliners podcast, it's like 300 plus interviews that I've done with people, actors, authors, film stars, TV stars. I mean, the list goes on and on. Sports stars, it just goes on and on and on.
I mean, I know recently you had, I believe it was Delia Smith joined you for a chat, and to have someone like her say that she loved your interview style and just how relaxed and she felt she could open up to you, to have people say that to you must be just amazing.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm a professional at what I do, and I'm an expert in it. It's because that's what I do. I do it 12 hours a week, right? 40 weeks a year. It's relentless. It's like every show is a Graham Norton show, right? And every interview is sometimes the length of an entire Graham Norton show with one person. So it's just woof, relentless. You know, just yesterday was Matt Goss from Bros and Kat Deely and Edith Bowman. Next week there's like James Bay and Lem Cisse and like all these kind of really super interesting and brilliant people. There was like 1 week where we did Sir Rod Stewart, Kylie Minogue and Sting, like in 1 week. It's just madness, right? So when someone like Delia Smith it's my dog. When someone like Delia Smith turns round and says something like that, or Sir Rod Stewart, you know, at the end of an interview, he said, That, I've got to tell you, he said, that is my favourite interview. He said it was just gorgeous. That's the words he used. That's nice, right? You'll take that, won't you? You take that. You just go, okay, that's good, because he's been interviewed a lot of times, right? So if he turns around and says that's what he likes, then you take that, won't you?
Do you ever have those moments where you kind of have to sort of pinch yourself because, you know, you like you say, you get to interview so many amazing people. You get to, you know, this is your job. I mean, are there moments when you kind of have to sort of take a step back and go, I still can't believe I do this job?
You know, so I just got to get my dog up. Lower, up, go on. No, not here. Not here. Up, come. There you go. Egypt dog. Egypt dog. Yeah. I mean, it happens all the time. I mean, you know, Matt Goss was on the show, right? And Matt Goss was in one of the biggest pop bands in the world in the 80s. He's, you know, he spent 12 years doing a nightly show in Las Vegas. His brother Luke Goss has been in all kinds of movies. It's kind of weird, right? Like, the other day I was doing an event at the Barbican. I was hosting at the Barbican in London. It was a music event. And I was talking to a singer called Brett Anderson from the band Suede. And we were just talking and chatting away, and it was just like we knew each other. But like in the 90s, I was like in my 20s, he was a bit older than me. And they were like one of the biggest bands in the country. Like they were literally one of the coolest. You were just like untouchable. They were so cool. And now we're just on a level, right? Well, we're not, because he's an artist, and artists are always extraordinary people, right? But it was just wow. And I do think that a lot. You know. And you should never lose that. You're never bigger than your guest. You're never more famous than your guest. You're never more important than your guest. It's all about your guest, right? And they should be respected. Because, yes, I'm good at what I do, no question, but I haven't done what they've done, you know. And the least thing I can do is be well researched and ask interesting questions.
So for you, where did it all begin? Where did the interest in broadcast and radio? Do you remember kind of where you were first became interested?
Do you know what, mate? It didn't really cross my mind. You know, remember the first radio job I got was Radio 1, right? It wasn't like I went through student radio and then into local radio and then to Radio 1. I just went to Radio 1, right? So, and then within a year, I'd won an award, like the Sony Award, which at the time was the Oscars of radio. And I was like, well, this is all right. Joined in October 2022, I think in like beginning of joined in October of 2002, so it's my 20th anniversary of BBC this year. And less than 6 months later, I'd won the most prestigious award for specialist music presenting. Like, it was like weird. And then I went on 8 years later to win the Sony Award for Best Speech. And to the best of my knowledge, I think I'm the only presenter in the country who's won those both sections. Has been regarded to be best at that time in both things, yeah. So, you know, I never really wanted to. I know it found me, and once I realised. But to be honest, it's really the 6 years at 5 Live and then the years at Asian Network that really made me who I am. Radio 1 was amazing. That was much more music orientated and DJing. But to be a broadcaster, it's been Asian Network and 5 Live, really.
I mean, who were the people that maybe you looked up to, or people that you kind of aspired to be, not necessarily like, but you sort of thought, oh, you've got it, sort of bob on, I'd love to do that sort of thing?
No one. If I'm honest, there's no one I was like, I want to be you. Because remember, at Radio 1, everyone was hired. Oh, that's a lie, actually. Zane Lowe. Like, Zane Lowe, to this day, is the best specialist music presenter in the history of music DJing, right? Like, there is no question. And I very much wanted to make sure that I could be my version of him, right? Everything was so precise, knowledgeable. Yeah, Zane Lowe. Yeah, without question. But he was the one. Yeah, definitely him. But I wanted to be my version of him. Not him.
And so what's a typical day like for you when you're presenting on Five Live? Kind of, sort of, where does your day start? How does it go along? What's a day like for you?
Well, it all depends, really, because some days you'll have to do a pre-recorded interview before the show. So Bob Odenkirk, who plays Better Call Saul, Saul Goodman in Breaking Bad, that had to be an 11 a.m. pre-rec, so you get in early, or it could be, because they're on the West Coast in LA, a pre-recorded interview after the show. So it's either, I think I had to come in on a Friday to interview Adam McKay, the director of Don't Look Up and The Big Short and Anchorman. I had to do that. So it's all different. It's all different. It all depends on the day. Do you have a comedian on at 2:00, like Nish Kumar, who I know really well? So you don't really have to do that much prep for a Nish Kumar interview because we know each other. Or you're interviewing someone who's written a book that you really have to know. Like, don't try and blag your way through it with someone who's, especially non-fiction or fiction. Like, you definitely can't. So it changes every day, and that's what makes it interesting, Matthew, right? You don't have to go, God, this is Groundhog Day. I mean, sometimes it might feel a bit like that, but rarely.
And I mean, is there a guest that you've never had the chance to speak to that you would love to speak with one day? Someone that you've never had the chance to yet?
I mean, there are the obvious ones. There's like Obama, Malala, Elon Musk. There'd be some people who you'd go. But all the big British, Drake would be interesting. I think Drake would be really interesting guy to interview. Jurgen Klopp. I'd love to interview Jurgen Klopp. I think he's a fascinating man. My list would go on, really. Yeah. I'm trying to think. I've interviewed so many people from so many different. I'm sure there'd be. The thing is that it's really difficult. So if you're interviewing someone because they're out to sell a film, right? It's difficult to know where you're going to go with that, because some actors are just not very interesting, right? They're just but even more than that, because that's a bit unfair, right? But actually, there are people in every walk of life who are not very interesting. There are radio presenters who are not very interesting. More that once you interview an actor about the film, they've already moved on. They may have finished that film a year before and have done another project or two since then. So it's always a bit weird that doing them. So I don't know, man, like, I'm doing all right, right? You just want to interview interesting people who've got good stories and are engaged. I interviewed this guitar band called Wet Leg recently, and it was an absolute horror show. Long pauses, them being a bit silly, not really taking anything seriously. It totally annoyed my audience. They were so annoyed with these two. And that was hard work. But it was fun, because you've got to be tested, haven't you?
And I suppose as well, that's the kind of the time that you maybe learn about kind of yourself and sort of ways to do things, ways that things don't necessarily always work. So, I mean, what would you say is maybe the greatest thing you've learned, or that someone has, maybe advice that someone's given you?
Oh, know your worth, man. Like, accept how good you are at something. You know, don't let anyone drag you down or make you feel anything less than you are. You know, hold your head up high, work hard, and deliver. And, you know, forget anyone who, through their own jealousy, will try and keep you down. You know, the most important thing in this game is self-belief, I think. Self-belief, hard work, and being kind, being quite a nice person. Those three things work very well.
And I mean, obviously, social media is something that can be good or bad. I mean, what's your experiences with social media been like? Because obviously, it's a way that you can connect with your listeners and get responses, but at the same time, it can be a double-edged sword of it, really.
Yeah, I have a very good relationship with Twitter. And at Twitter, I mean, look, I've had the odd racist stuff and abusive stuff and death threats. I've had all of that stuff, but largely, like, the vast majority of my interactions are really positive. I like social media. I like Instagram. I had to pull back from Twitter because I was getting so addicted to it, Matthew. You know, I really was. And I still am. I'm still trying to work out how to wean myself off it so that I don't use it all the time. You know, keep trying.
And I mean, we must just briefly talk, of course, the fact that, you know, Five Live, it's been a part of your life now for a number of years. Is that the kind of the ultimate dream, or is there something you would love to go on to going forward? Is there something you would love to do that you haven't done just yet?
Well, everything's a next stage until you die, right? So Five Live is, you know, this is not my retirement fund. You know, it is what it is at the time that it is. One day, either I will tire of it or it will tire of me. And when that happens, right? The key is realizing when it's tiring of you, so it doesn't come as a shock. And do lots of other things. You know, I do a podcast for Penguin Books. I was at the Olympics presenting in Japan for BBC Television. I'm writing a book which is out on August the 18th called Let's Talk. I host corporate events, business events. I've written a few pieces for GQ. You know, it's like, I'm keeping life interesting, Matthew, right? Like, I'm not standing still. I'm 50 years old, so I'm not about to go anywhere soon, you know? Yeah.
And I mean, I was just going to say briefly, tell us a bit about your book and how did you find the writing process?
Oh, the writing process, Matthew, was horrendous. I still haven't finished it. I've got to do a conclusion today. So as soon as I get off the phone from you, I'm going to just go up to my office and do that. But yeah, I found it horrendous. It's the hardest creative thing I've ever done in my life. You know, it's like 7 dissertations, right? It's insane. And I put it off for about a year, making all kinds of excuses, running away from it. Once I finally understood what it meant, I loved it. Loved it. You know? Yeah. But it's hard. It's hard. Yeah. But the book is called Let's Talk, and it's about how to have better conversations. Because I realized that what I was doing in my show was really resonating with listeners, and they were saying, God, it's not like an interview, it's more like a conversation. They were the kind of feedbacks I get. Or you're really listening. You really let the other one talk before you talk. And Matthew, these are all rules of conversation. And I've noticed it in the conversation we're having. You're an active listener. So you'll use some of the words that I've said in my answer, and then you'll pick up on them again and move on, which means that's a real skill, right? And you'll be surprised how many people aren't very good at that. Especially like in my game, they're not very good at it. They're not listening to the answer because they're too busy thinking about the next question, right? And the key is just to have the confidence but that's from an interviewing perspective. From a conversational perspective, I want people to understand that these phones that we're on, we need to be able to put them down and talk to each other. And that's how we really find out about each other. If you and I were to do this now on WhatsApp voice note, would it be as good? No?
Probably not. No, I was going to say, it's one of those things. I mean, I know that one of the things that I've noticed over the years that, or sort of since I started this, that I do, and you won't see this obviously if it's on the radio, but I'll listen to what my guest is saying and I nod to kind of show that I'm listening, but I'm not going to talk over you while you're talking to me. And a few people have pointed that out to me. That's something I didn't realize I was doing until it got like pointed out to me. But then now that it has been, I kind of go, yeah, no, I do that. And that's my way of kind of telling my guests so that they can see me, showing them that I'm, taking it all in. But at the same time, I'm not then cutting over them every 5 minutes. And you got that kind of bit going on.
It's a skill. No question. It's a skill,
Now, I just want to say, obviously, it's been a pleasure talking to you. But before we go, we must, of course, talk a little bit about the amazing NHS staff. So what are your thoughts on how amazing our NHS are? And also any messages that you might have for anyone who is listening in hospital at the moment?
So my mum was a nurse in the NHS for over 30 years. So I am acutely aware of just how amazing. And look, everybody says it, right? But I remember dropping my mum off to do nights. Well, my dad did, but we'd sit in the back of the car. And she'd go and work. And then I remember, and I write about this in the book, that people never forgot her. She'd walk through the town centre, and even years after she'd retired, people go, Nurse Rohini or Nurse Arthanayake, I remember, do you remember me? You looked after me on da-da-da-da. It's just an amazing institution that we should be so proud of. It's probably the single greatest thing about being British, I think, the NHS. It's amazing. Amazing. You go around the world and you get sick. Go to America, have no money and get sick. See what happens, right? It's just brilliant. And the fact you're doing hospital radio is superb, man, right? For people that are sitting there, not feeling great, got great care around them, may not even have relatives coming to visit them, feeling isolated and lonely. But at least one thing they don't have to worry about is paying for their healthcare, right? They don't have to think, when I get out, I'm going to have to write a check, or I'm going to have to pay a big insurance premium, right? So good, so good. It's a real service that you are doing for the NHS, And
I mean, what would you like to say to anyone, any of the patients who are in hospital at the moment? Have you got any messages for them?
Request your favourite record. Get music playing, because I think one thing we've discovered in the pandemic and through lockdowns, one thing a lot of people told me about was how important music became to them. The joy that it brings, takes you away for a few minutes, maybe even an hour, put in your favourite album. All those things are so important, Matthew.
Now, I just want to say...
Get well. That's obviously the thing that I would say is get well.
Now, I just want to say it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for giving up your time. Of course, keep safe, and you're welcome back anytime.
Oh, well, thank you, Matthew. And all I can say is sorry for it taking us 10 years to get this to happen, and me constantly kind of going, yeah, I'll do it, and then not happening, and then not turning up on the Zoom, and then not being able to reply to you, and then so brilliant. I'm so glad we got to do this. All right.